Hi everyone, it's Marianne and welcome to my Oasis Life. In this video, let's talk about starter monsteras, which are monstera plants that I would recommend for new plant parents. So welcome to the very first episode of my starter plant series or beginner plant series, where I talk about plants that belong to a popular genus of plant and tell you which ones are great for beginners and share with you my care tips on them. So for this first episode, I'm going to talk about starter monsteras or monstera plants that are great for plant beginners. So there are about 48 officially identified species of monstera plants, and when we find them in nurseries and garden centers, they're often mislabeled as split leaf philodendron or commonly called as Swiss cheese plants because of their fenestrations and the holes that they have in the leaves. They are native to Central and South America, but some species could also be found in Southeast Asia and in the West Indies. So the very first one that I'm going to share with you is of course none other than the Monstera deliciosa. I've done several videos already on the Monstera deliciosa, so I'm going to link them down in the description and also create a playlist for it if you want to check them out. So the Monstera deliciosa is arguably the most popular among the monsteras out there. As far as trendy plants goes, this has been trendy for quite a few years now, and it's still very much a sought after plant because it's such a great plant to have whether you start with a juvenile Monstera deliciosa or you spring for a large one. This is a great plant to have at any stage of its maturity. It has become more accessible in the market now, but I know in some places it's still uncommon. Among the monsteras, this is probably the easiest one to care for. It requires bright indirect light, but it can tolerate moderate light. And you water your Monstera deliciosa when the soil is dry. It can handle a little bit of underwatering, but don't let it stay dry for too long. And it also prefers to be a little bit root bound, so you don't really have to repot your Monstera deliciosa right away. You could wait a year or two before you repot your Monstera deliciosa. And it doesn't require a lot of humidity. Even during the winter, it's still kept growing, but it could definitely benefit for a higher level of humidity. Ever since I started the humidifier for my plants, they have really thrived, and as you can see from my Monstera deliciosa, the two newest leaves it has is larger than any other leaves that it currently has. And I attribute that to several things, which is first, as I mentioned, the increased humidity level, and second, it is the growing season, and third, when I repotted it into a deeper pot. Not necessarily a larger pot, but a deeper pot, which enabled the roots to have more space to grow downwards instead of just coil around the pot. And of course, I've also been fertilizing it, giving it the right amount of water and bright indirect light, and also cleaning the leaves with a neem oil and soap water solution. So I think all those things combined help contribute to the growth of larger leaves on my Monstera deliciosa. So there's not really a lot of cons into getting a Monstera deliciosa for new plant parents. The one con is probably it is a large plant, or it could quickly grow into a large plant. And if you have a tighter, smaller space, a Monstera deliciosa might not be a right fit for you. Even if you start with a juvenile Monstera deliciosa, like with this one. This one is actually a propagation of the mother plant, and it's a baby Monstera right now, but by the end of the growing season, this would become not quite this big, but it will definitely grow at least half the size of its mother plant. So it is a very fast grower, so that could be a con if you have a small space. But there's a few things that you can do to manage the size of your Monstera deliciosa. You can trim the roots instead of repotting it to a larger pot, and you could also give it a moss bowl like I did with this one so that it would grow vertically instead of it spreading horizontally. And if you've seen my previous Monstera deliciosa videos, you know that I have pruned a lot from this mother plant already, so I'm able to keep and maintain its size. Common problems with the Monstera deliciosa is the same ones that you'll probably have with your other house plants. Like with pests, the only pest pressures that I experience with the Monstera deliciosa is fungus gnats, which really can't be helped for most of us. I will have a separate video on how to deal with fungus gnats, but fungus gnats are pretty easy to deal with, and they don't really harm your plants. They're just really annoying. And second is yellowing leaves. So for Monstera deliciosa, yellowing leaves could mean a few things, but in my experience, a yellowing leaf in a Monstera deliciosa usually is just from a really old leaf or mature leaf from a Monstera deliciosa that is ready to die out. So it doesn't necessarily mean there's something wrong with my Monstera deliciosa. It's just that it's a mature leaf that has already completed its life cycle. Second reason that there might be a yellowing leaf is due to overwatering, but that would mean you're already experiencing root rot in your Monstera deliciosa. But another way to tell if your Monstera deliciosa is experiencing Overwatering is through guttation. So guttation is a phenomenon where the leaf of the Monstera deliciosa will form water droplets at the edge of the leaves, and that's usually a sign of overwatering. And there are also many different varieties of Monstera deliciosa. This is probably the most common one. The most common cultivar of the Monstera deliciosa is the Monstera borsigiana. It's really hard to tell if you have a Monstera deliciosa or if it's a Monstera deliciosa borsigiana, because most of the Monstera deliciosas that we buy from nurseries are in the juvenile form. But you would know that it's a Monstera deliciosa if there's a ribboning around this part of the leaf and the petiole. But that doesn't really matter if you have a Monstera deliciosa or a Monstera borsigiana. It's basically looks the same. It's like I said, especially when it's in juvenile form, and even in the mature form, the difference is really very, very minimal and very hard to tell. And of course, there's the Monstera albo variegata, which is the one that has white variegation in it, in the thigh constellation Monstera, which has these splashes of lime and yellow variegation in it, which those varieties tend to be a lot more expensive because they're higher in demand and lower in supply. And the Monstera deliciosa used to be very expensive too, but this is quite affordable now. You could find one for under $20 in your local garden centers, and I really don't recommend paying any more than that when it comes to a regular Monstera deliciosa. So the next one is the Monstera siltepecana, and this is a great beginner Monstera plant because caring for this is pretty much taking care of a pothos, and you know how I feel about pothos. The Monstera siltepecana definitely reminds me a lot of the Cebu blue pothos. They're very similar in how they grow and how I care for them. The Monstera siltepecana is not a rare Monstera, but it's definitely not as common. I was lucky enough to find this at my local Lowe's, and I got it for $17 for this size. So it was a really lucky find, but I haven't seen one since. Kind of like with the Cebu blue pothos, I saw it once at my local Lowe's, never seen it again, and I'm still on the lookout for another Cebu blue pothos. So when I bought this, it was just probably trailing down to here, and now it has trailed this much. They're also very easy to propagate because they form aerial roots, which makes it a lot easier and faster to propagate when I make cuttings from my Monstera siltepecana. And you can have it trailing down or climbing up. I have it climbing up like I have over here. Letting it climb up would definitely help it produce larger leaves, and I'm also wondering if it would eventually split, because like the Cebu blue pothos, once you let it climb up, it would eventually produce fenestrations. I think it would, since it's a Monstera, but that would be nice to see. But even then, this is already beautiful like this, and it's a really nice plant to have. So if you do see a Monstera siltepecana in your local nurseries or garden centers, do grab it. Don't be intimidated by it. At first, I thought it was also one of those Monsteras that are hard to care for, but now that I have it, it's really such an easy care plant. Take care of it like pothos. I do give it bright indirect light. This one I have on a west facing window, which gets a lot of bright light in the afternoons. I put a sheer curtain on the window just so to avoid leaf burn, because it has suffered leaf burn from getting too much light. And as you can see over here, there is a yellowing leaf, which is also has been happening quite a little bit. And I know it's not root rot because I'm actually been underwatering this Monstera siltepecana quite a lot. And kind of like with the Cebu blue pothos, which I've also noticed when I let my Cebu blue pothos go without water for too long, it produces a lot of yellowing leaves. So this one, you're gonna have to be on top of the watering a little bit. It still prefers to be dried out before you water it, but don't let it go dry for a long period of time, or else it would produce yellowing leaves like this one. And I would say this Monstera siltepecana do enjoy a certain level of humidity. I don't think this would thrive in low humidity levels. If it's anything like my Cebu blue pothos, that doesn't like low humidity as well. So this one would probably require a little bit more humidity than the Monstera deliciosa, which can get by with low humidity. And as far as pest pressures, I haven't experienced any pest pressures with my Monstera siltepecana, but mind you, I only had this for like about a couple months now. I didn't even experience fungus gnats with this one, even when I was having like a huge fungus gnats infestation. So if you like Monsteras and you like pothos like I do, then the Monstera siltepecana is definitely a good addition to your plant collection. So the third starter Monstera plant that I'm recommending is not a Monstera technically, but it's the Rhaphidophora tetrasperma. I think I said that right. It's often called the mini monstera or monstera minima. But this is a great beginner monstera plant because it looks like the Monstera deliciosa. But if you're not ready to commit to a large plant like the Monstera deliciosa, then I highly recommend getting the Rhaphidophora tetrasperma or the Monstera minima. When I got this, it was probably just this big, like half of it, and now it has grown so much and so fast. This is definitely a fast grower. I did give it a moss bowl so that it has something to climb on. And if you want to know how I made this moss bowl in a way that I could carry it by the moss bowl and not have the pot drop, then go check my DIY video. I would link it up here and also down in the description, which made it so convenient for me when I need to water it. So I don't have to bring this pot along with me. I just like lift it out of the pot and go take it out to water. So this is a very easy care plant as well. As you can see, it's a very fast grower. I do highly recommend giving it a moss bowl, although you could get by without one. I've seen people not give it a moss bowl, but this is definitely a climber. So I think it would be much happier if you give it something to climb on. But if you look closely at my Rhaphidophora tetrasperma or Monstera minima, you would see that there are some light green spots on some of the leaves, and that is not a variegation, it's a leaf damage. The leaves of the Monstera minima can be quite delicate. This happened because, well, I was a little bit rough with it when I was repotting it, so you could also see some of the damaged leaves at the bottom with some browning tips and stuff. But these light green spots is actually a result of me spraying neem oil and soap water solution on it, because like I said, I was suffering from fungus gnat infection, and I thought as a preventive measure, let me spray this down as well. But the spray did cause some damage to the leaves. With the Monstera minima, that spray kind of like bleached the leaves, but that's okay. I don't mind it. I don't plan on cutting them off. And as the leaves mature, they fade out a little bit anyways. So that's fine. But yeah, this is the Monstera minima, aka Rhaphidophora tetrasperma. This comes in two variations as well, as far as I know. There's the Rhaphidophora tetrasperma, and there's the Rhaphidophora tetrasperma tissue culture, which is the one that's a little bit more popular and easily obtainable. I do think this one is the tissue culture, but then I'm not sure, because they say the way you can tell a difference between the tissue culture and the actual RT. If it's very fenestrated, then it's the regular RT, which I think this one is very fenestrated, but either way, it's fine. If this one turns out to be just a tissue culture, I don't care either way. It looks very pretty, and like I said, if you want a Monstera plant, but you're not ready to commit to the Monstera deliciosa, then get this one, the Monstera minima. So the fourth and the last starter monstera that I'm recommending is the Monstera adansonii. So this one is native to the West Indies, and this I actually hesitate to include in this list because I know some people have trouble with their Monstera adansonii. I personally had lots of troubles with Monstera adansonii, so I'm not sure if this actually qualifies as a starter monstera, but a lot of other people have great luck with their Monstera adansonii, so you might be one of those people. So I decided to include this in my starter monstera list. So this is commonly available in two forms, the wide leaf form and the narrow leaf form. I believe this one is the narrow leaf form, and this might be the wide leaf form because I got two different cuttings of it when I bought it last year in New York City. As you can see in the narrow form, it doesn't have a lot of fenestrations. Actually, most of it doesn't have any fenestrations at all, though you can see with the newer leaves, it's starting to have them. And with this one, with the wider leaf one, it does produce a bit more fenestrations. And with this one, so this one did not do well over the winter time, and it doesn't like sudden changes in temperatures, and it doesn't like cold temperatures. So that's why I think it act up during the winter time. But now it's the growing season again, and it has been receiving a lot of humidity and a lot of light. So as long as you can provide the right conditions for it, it's a pretty easy plant to care for. Like I said, once now that it's the growing season and it's getting what it needs, I haven't had any much problems with it anymore. I'm just like waiting for it to grow. This one in the wild is naturally a climber, but as an indoor plant, it's used as a hanging or a trailing plant. Either way, it's beautiful. Right now, I am treating this as a trailing or a hanging plant, but eventually I might give it something to climb onto. As you can see, the leaves are pointing upward. It's really looking for something to climb onto. And if I want the leaves to grow bigger and produce more fenestrations or holes, then I should probably give it something to climb onto if I want that to happen. Yellowing leaves doesn't necessarily mean root rot for the Monstera adansonii, although that could be one of the issues, but it could also mean lack of humidity and a sudden drop in temperature for the Monstera adansonii. And this one I water when it's about 75% dry. I don't let it go too long without watering as well, so I make sure it has a pretty regular watering schedule, because like I said, among all the 4 starter monsteras that I've mentioned in this video, this one is probably the one that's a bit more finicky than the rest of them. Next to the Monstera deliciosa, this is probably the next most readily accessible monstera. I know this has been popping up in a lot of nurseries and garden centers, especially this year. But just be careful of scammers online when it comes to Monstera adansonii, because some of them would try to pass off a Monstera adansonii as a Monstera obliqua, which is a more rare species or variety of a Monstera that looks very similar to Monstera adansonii. So just be careful out there if you're trying to purchase a Monstera obliqua or a Monstera adansonii. Make sure that you're getting the genuine one and you're not getting overcharged for it, or you're not getting duped into getting something that you think you're getting, but it's actually just a regular Monstera adansonii, not a Monstera obliqua. So those are the starter monsteras that I recommend for new plant parents: the Monstera deliciosa, the Monstera siltepecana, the Monstera minima or the Rhaphidophora tetrasperma, and the Monstera adansonii. If you're looking into adding monsteras into your plant collection, then I would suggest starting with this 4. They're relatively easy to care for plants and a great addition to any plant collection, especially for new plant parents. So if there are other starter monsteras that you think should be included in this list, let me know down in the comments so that I can see it and other plant parents can see it as well and check out those monsteras too. But yeah, so thank you so much for watching. I hope you learned something and enjoyed this video. But before I go, I just want to say, with everything that's been going on from COVID-19 to Black Lives Matter movement, which I wholeheartedly support, but as a creator, I know it's a tricky balance, even though I just have a very small platform. But it's a platform that I want to use to help create positive change and help stop systemic racism and end police brutality in our country and anywhere else in the world. And like I said, as a creator, it's a tricky balance. I want to make sure my viewers and subscribers know where I stand, but at the same time, I don't want to just hear myself talk about issue. I feel like it's a little bit self-serving. So as you've seen, if you've been following me on my Instagram or TikTok, or even here on YouTube, I've been trying to use my platform to help uplift Black voices, Black creators, Black activists that we should be hearing from and we should be paying attention to. And I'm not judging any creators that has been putting out regular content during this time, because I myself don't even know if I should be putting content or not. Everyone's just finding their balance or do what feels right for them. So this is not me passing any judgment on anyone, because we're all trying to figure out what the right thing to do here. But for me, what feels right is to acknowledge what happened, make my stand, and use my platform to uplift Black voices, activists, and creators that we should be hearing from during this time. And while it's tempting to say I'm just going to put regular content to provide distraction and a mental health break for people, I get the mental health break part, but at the same time, this is not the time to be distracted, or this is not the time to choose to want to have a distraction. This is the time that we need to be paying attention, no matter how uncomfortable it is, no matter how exhausting it is, because this is not the first time this happened. The murder of George Floyd is not the first time police brutality ended up in a killing of an innocent Black man or Black woman. So I don't think we need distractions right now. We need our full attention on it right now. And if we can't make change now, when can we make change? We shouldn't lose the momentum. We shouldn't lose this moment to enact real change, especially with the presidential elections coming up. And I get it. You come to my channel or any plant tuber channel not to listen to their political views or whatnot. You just want to learn about plants. And I get that. That's why I say it's a very hard balance for me to find, especially as a small creator, on whether I should speak out or just do regular content or somehow find a happy medium. And we're all just trying to find out what's the right thing to do here. But If I don't say something, it just doesn't feel right. And I know this time has also been like a learning period for a lot of us. And I encourage you to learn much on the issue as much as possible. But to be honest, we don't need to read the dissertation to know that racism is bad, that police brutality is wrong, or what happened to George Floyd was a murder. What happened to George Floyd or Breonna Taylor and everyone else that got murdered by the police is wrong. We don't need to read 10 books or watch 10 documentaries to realize that what's happening to Black people across this country is wrong. So, and I don't have all the answers, so I'm not going to pretend to know all the answers. But I think the very least that we can do as allies is to listen and pay attention and help in any way that we can. And as a way to help, I am pledging my first YouTube check. And as many of you know, I've reached over 1K subscribers, and the main reason is monumental for any YouTuber is because that's when we start getting paid for doing videos. So what I'm going to do is I'm pledging to donate my very first YouTube check whenever I get it. I think I get it after I receive my first $100 in revenue. So I'm pledging my first YouTube check to go towards a Black Lives Matter organization, and also an organization that is helping migrant kids at the border, because we've also heard recent reports of sexual assault against thousands of minors that have been detained at the border. There's a lot going on in this country right now, but that's not a reason to be scared. It's a reason to have hope, and it's a reason to act, and it's a reason to not give up. Can't let the bastards win. But yeah, that's it for this video. Thanks so much for watching. I see you. I appreciate you. Take care of yourselves and each other, and have a plentiful day. Bye. Take to the streets to fight the police.